The Institute of World Affairs at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee presents International Focus, a weekly discussion of the people and events behind today's global headlines. Support provided by Milwaukee Public Television and the UW-M Center for International Education. Now here's your host, Doug Savage.
Welcome to International Focus. Brazilian President Dilma Rousseff exited the presidential palace last week, vowing to return to office. With two-thirds of the Senate voting to put her on trial, however, she faces an uphill road. But many of Ms. Rousseff's opponents are embroiled in scandals of their own. In fact, several politicians in the line of presidential succession are facing accusations and charges that could force them from office as well. To help us understand the origins, scale, and potential fallout from this current political crisis, we're joined by a pair of Brazil watchers. Cassio Muniz is visiting assistant professor and coordinator of the Portuguese Program at UW-M. He has also worked for the Ministries of Industry and Commerce and Environment in his native Brazil. His research focus includes political institutions and electoral reform in Latin America. Jessica Rich is assistant professor of political science at Marquette University, where her research and teaching focus on mobilization, social activism, and policy process in Latin America. Welcome, both of you.
Thank you.
Well, maybe we could start with sort of a Brazilian politics 101. I think we've got a slide that explains a little bit about just kind of the broad parameters. So we have two houses, a Chamber of Deputies and a Senate, 594 total members. And this is a statistic that will surprise many viewers, I would think. 28 parties currently hold seats. And Dilma Rousseff's Workers' Party currently has the most seats in the Chamber of Deputies and the second most in the Senate. So talk a little bit about those parties. I mean, can we place them easily on an ideological left-to-right scale in terms of the main parties and who's in power right now?
Yes, there is the Workers' Party has been traditionally been a left-leaning party, and during Lula's administration, it moved a little bit more towards the center, but it's still considered to be a center, left-wing party. The other party, the second one, is the PMDB. It's a centrist party, center-right, some would say. And then you have PSDB, the runner-up for the last four elections, the three elections, and it's also considered to be more centrist and has moved a little bit more to the center-right during Cardoso's administration. And you have another one, it's DEM, former PFL, that is a right-wing party. So those are some of the main parties that occupy the political spectrum.
But maybe if I can jump in and add to that, many of the political parties in Brazil are not known for being particularly programmatic or having a particularly coherent ideology. And one thing to keep in mind is that by many accounts, Brazil is the most fragmented political party system in the world. And a lot of the problems that are occurring now stems in part from the structure of Brazil's political system. It's trying to come up with a governing coalition is a little bit like trying to herd cats in Brazil.
Well, and again, I mean, I think that's unusual to have 28 parties represented in the legislature at any one time. And there are parties who are currently not have seats, right? So there's even more than 28.
35 total. Last year was 3 new parties created, and interesting enough, one of the new parties is called New Party.
Well, you can't keep that name forever, I guess. But so talk a little bit about the history of the Workers' Party. I mean, at one point under Lula's administration, I mean, his approval rating was through the roof, right? It was like in the 90s, and now, as she leaves office, Ms. Rousseff's is perhaps the lowest. I think it's something in 10% or something. So what happened in those years in between?
Well, the Workers' Party have run, was running up in most of the elections since the redemocratization of Brazil, and they finally realized that they had to make some changes in order to become more competitive. And in 2002, Lula released a so-called letter to the Brazilian people, in which it broke a little bit with the most stiff stances of the party that was more left-leaning and became more aligned to the center left, and it became appeased the market and became more competitive.
Yeah. I mean, for a very long time, the Workers' Party was the party of the opposition. And so they were, criticizing the party in power, partly from a social justice perspective and partly from a anti-corruption perspective. And when the Workers' Party finally made it not only to power, but when Lula made it to the presidency, suddenly, Lula also reaped the benefits of a major boom in commodities prices. And so the economy was doing very, very well under Lula. And after Dilma came to power, there was an incredible crash in the price of commodities. And so that somewhat accounts for the discrepancy in popularity as well. When the economy is doing well, whoever's in power reaps the rewards. And when the economy is doing poorly, whoever's in power suffers in popularity as well.
So let's talk a little bit about her situation right now. What is she actually accused of doing?
Well, she's been accused of tampering with, juggling with the budget. Basically, she had some of the public banks paying for some of the social programs that she has in place, and she would delay the payment back to the banks, and that made the books look a little bit more beautiful, and that's basically what she's been accused of.
So significantly, unlike many people in the current round of scandal, she's not in any way accused of enriching herself.
No, and she's actually, the major scandal, the car wash scandal, the Lava Jato scandal, she's actually not directly implicated in that scandal at all, whether for enriching herself or whether for working for her party. What she's actually being accused of is not related to the major scandal that's plaguing her party.
Well, and she's made the case that sort of massaging the books, if you will, was a long-standing practice, that many of her predecessors had done similar kinds of things. So it's not actually about that. I mean, who are her primary opponents and antagonists? I mean, what is this really about?
Well, prior to this impeachment, right? And in fact, the last time we were talking about Brazil, we were discussing different scenarios for getting rid of Dilma. And the point is that she has quite a number of enemies, and these enemies were looking for different ways to get her out of power. So one way would be to try to implicate her in the Lava Jato scandal, in the car wash scandal. Another way would be to accuse her and her vice president of illegal campaign financing. And then a third way would be to implicate her in what she's currently being accused of. But interestingly, this was probably the lesser of the crimes, but it was the easiest route forward toward impeachment. But that doesn't really get to your question of who are her enemies.
In this process, what happens is that with the popularity low, as a consequence of the downwards, the economic downwards, leading to the election, right? And some say that she was not forthcoming with the actual state of the art of the economy, and when she was elected, and that she disclosed what was really going to happen, then people got a little bit upset with her, and as the economy went down, so did her popularity. But even before that, you have the opposition that was, as Jessica mentioned, trying in several venues they asked to recount the votes. That was the first thing, and then they filed against campaign finance, and there was a lot of instances that they were trying to oust her. But apparently the state of the economy that was not doing so well, together with the narrative of the corruption scandal that was taking place at the car wash operation, which was quite a big endeavor that was taking place with over 130 people arrested, over 500 seizure and seize warrants, and so this narrative was captured by the opposition, and it was confounded in the sense that many people would think that she was implicated with the Lava Jato, which was not the case.
I was just going to add to that by saying that, in part, her sinking in popularity due to this recession as you were saying, gave the opposition an opportunity, right, to try to get her out of power. But at the same time, this incredibly broad corruption scandal that implicated an astoundingly large number of politicians who are in office, many of whom are her enemies in Congress, it actually threatened them. And so it gave them an extra impetus to try to get her out of power so that they could gain some more control over the process of investigating into these corruptions. Whether or not they actually could is a different story, but it's an extra incentive to try to get rid of Dilma from power.
Well, I think we've got a slide here to give some sense of the scope of the scandal so far in terms of secession. Now, of course, Dilma as president is now suspended pending the investigation. So the vice president is now the interim president, who himself has been fined for campaign finance violations. Were he to be removed, the next in line is the president of the lower house of the legislature. The former president was charged with taking a very gaudy number of $40 million in bribes, so he is temporarily at least out of his position. So the interim president of the chamber is now in place. He's also been accused, and were he to go, the next in line is the president of the Senate, who also has accusations of tax evasion and bribery against him. So there you have multiple levels of corruption charges, at least, involving people who are in direct line. So what does this mean for the future going forward? I mean, when do we have a more stable leadership, do you think? I mean, how do we get to that point?
Well, it's really difficult. There's someone was saying that one of the most stressful professions in the world now is to be Brazilian political scientist right now, because it's really hard to predict what's going to happen. It shows a failure of the political system in Brazil overall, and we don't know what's going to happen from now on. We are watching close, but it's really hard to predict. Many say that only new elections would bring the level of discontent that it's going on in Brazil, especially with the electorate down. Otherwise, we're gonna keep on going with this discontent. And as an example, as the interim president was giving an interview on Sunday on the major Brazilian TV, there was a lot of protests going on with people knocking on their kettles and pans and throughout Brazil.
Well, we'll talk a little bit more about sort of the motive behind the impeachment itself, but first we'll take a short break. We'll be right back.
The Institute of World Affairs presents our community with a range of public programs relating to global issues, U.S. foreign policy, and the world economy. For more information about the Institute of World Affairs, call 414-229-3220 or visit our website at www.iwa.uwm.edu.
Welcome back. We're discussing Brazil's political crisis with Cassio Muniz and Jessica Rich. Well, the motives for the impeachment vary depending on who the analysis is being done by. When she was leaving office, Dilma said, quoting here, "It's a coup. I'm a victim of a great injustice." And the interim president, her vice president, Mr. Temer, said, "I'm convinced that it's necessary to rescue Brazilians' trust internally and internationally because it is fundamental so that our companies and workers, therefore all the productive areas within the country, can have enthusiasm and go back to their secure investments." So is that significant that his take on it is it's necessary to restore the sort of financial climate?
I think that his statement is, these two statements reflect very different aspects of what's happening. So if you want to just talk about his statement, I think it reflects, first of all, a need to fix the Brazilian economy. I mean, Brazil is going through an incredibly steep recession. With inflation at the same time as you have high levels of employment. But it also reflects his very strong focus on the economy and a lesser focus on the social programs for which the Workers' Party was very famous for promoting.
He's vowing to keep the social programs in place. Many say that with these austerity policies that he's going to implement, some cuts will be made. There's right now in Brazil a great deal of confusion within the policymakers that they, within the space of 2 days, they are making a statement and retracting the statement because of the reaction of the civil society and the organized sectors as well, especially the workers, the labor unions and other organized areas of the social movement. So there is a great deal of confusion. He placed as his finance minister someone that is really trusted within the market, and some say that he was the most preferred, and in fact he was Lula's president of the central bank when he was a president, and Lula was trying to bring him in to try to fix the economy. He didn't realize, but so he's trying hard, and that's all he has gone for him right now. It's to fix the economy, and he has a really short window to do this because his popularity is as low, or if not lower, than Dilma's, and there's this idea that people do not want Dilma, but they do not want Temer as well.
Well, let's talk a little bit about just who he is. He's, as you mentioned, not terribly popular. There's a recent poll where 58% of respondents said he should be impeached as well. So that's a difficult part to.
And he might. There is actually today one of the Supreme Court justice sent to the floor to the full House to judge the procedure that has been put in place to impeach him. So he might. That's not a certainty, especially because there's a new configuration of forces agglutinating within Congress, and we don't know if that's going to happen, but there is some procedure because he signed some of the same laws that led to Dilma Rousseff's impeachment.
Well, one of the things that I think the Workers' Party and both Lula and Dilma's administrations were credited with is bringing more people into the political process that had been marginalized. Poverty reduction programs, just in general, having a more inclusive approach. One of the things that Mr. Temer has been criticized for is, in his brief stint in office, setting up his cabinet, which now was all white and all male, which is very much a departure from what's happening. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, it's striking that, the composition of his new cabinet is striking in part because I don't know how long it's been since there's been an all-white cabinet, but there hasn't been an all...
Since Geisel.
Well, also an all-male cabinet.
There was all-male, and since the military dictatorship.
And I think under the I'm not sure if I have my numbers correct, but I think under the last administration there was something like upward of 15 female ministers. Is that right?
Quite a few.
So this is a striking difference. And in addition to that, there's some criticism for. He was searching for. He's said to be searching for a female cabinet minister, and so he was looking to maybe put her in the Ministry of Culture, which has now been subsumed under the Ministry of Education. So yes, he has an all-white, all-male cabinet, and he's also eliminated a large number of cabinet positions. This itself is not terribly striking because there were 37 ministries under Dilma, a very large number of ministries, and so he was trying to reduce the number of ministries, partly in terms of making government bureaucracy more streamlined, but some of the ministries that he eliminated were some of the key ministries fostering a more inclusive Brazilian political system.
There was, for example, a Ministry of Women, Racial Equality, and Human Rights. That was
the Ministry of Social Development and Combating Hunger.
Minister of Culture as well, and many say that and he's making a statement, and we are cutting costs, and he vouched to cut those ministers and also some appointed cabinet position as well as many as 4,000. But many say that this is just a statement that the budget of those ministers are not very, very big. And what makes those ministers important is just giving them the status of minister and putting people, women, and minorities in those positions and make the face of the Brazilian government more diverse. It's bad that did happen, but it's good that people took notice.
So let's take a step back. Now, throughout the region, there's been sort of a pendulum swing against the Bolivarian revolution. Look at places like Venezuela, Nicaragua, El Salvador, Ecuador, Bolivia. People that came in that wave around the Hugo Chavez era have really had pretty profound political reverses. I mean, is this part of that at all, or is each one its own unique case?
I mean, in one sense, you can say it's part of that because, going back to the state of the economy, one of the reasons why these leftists did so well is that they were governing during a commodities boom, right? During a period of very high commodities prices. The economies of many of these countries in Latin America are based on exporting primary commodities, and so economies were thriving. Whoever's in power tends to be fairly popular when the economy is doing well. Well, these leftists that reaped the benefits of booming economies are suffering the problems of economies that are crashing across Latin America, and so I think it's part of a wave of a shift in power due to poorly performing economies.
So are there any governance issues associated with this? I mean, irrespective of commodities prices, I mean, were these leftist governments governing well by their people for the most part, would you say, or not?
Well, that's when I would say you can't lump these governments all into the same category of the left.
Mm-hmm. Latin America is very diverse. There are some studies that show that leftist governments should be more friendly towards social issues, and that seems to be the case in Brazil, for instance, with the cash transfer program that they had and the policies that value the minimum income. In Brazil, everything is indexed to the minimum income, and that also gave a lot of purchasing power to the middle class, and the growth of the economy also lifted a lot of people out of poverty in Brazil. And with this crisis now, a lot of people are receding to the class that they were used to be, and that tends to cause a lot of disarray within the base base that once supported those parties. What's more important to notice is that what's happening in Brazil here, to some extent, has happened before in Honduras in 2009, in Paraguay in 2012, and now it's taking place in Brazil, the biggest country in Latin America, which accounts for about 40% of the Latin American GDP. And where Brazil goes, so Latin America goes as well, and that causes a great deal of concern among its neighbors, not only those that you mentioned, but even Uruguay has voiced a lot of concern about the democratic instances of this process as well. The president of the UNASUR, who happens to be a Colombia, he said that he might invoke the democratic clause that they have within this community of countries. It remains to be seen what's going to happen, but it's not looking good for the international community. Everybody's looking with a great deal of concern, and so is the academic people as well. There has been a great deal of manifestation of social, political scientist organization in Brazil and elsewhere, concerned with the future of the democracy in Brazil.
Well, we're unfortunately going to have to leave it at that. Cassio Muniz, Jessica Rich, thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
We'll stay tuned on Brazil, and our viewers, we'll see you soon.
For information about the Institute of World Affairs and its many programs, or to become a member of the Institute, call 414-229-3220 or visit us at our website,